Hello, guys and gals, and welcome. So we got some patch note changes for the Diablo 4 beta server slam, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of changes in here. Some of it's pretty technical, and I'm not exactly sure how to interpret a lot of it. So we're going to be going over this step by step. We're going to talk about it. I guess you could say these are patch notes, but at the same time, they also just seem to be moderate changes to the way things are working. So if you played the beta before, things might work a little bit differently than before. I also want to caution you that some of the stuff in here seems, well, a little hard to interpret. So from the previous patch notes, one of the things that they said was that the minions of the Necromancer would be easier to kill, right? Well, keep in mind that as I read this, because we're just going to start right here with this, because I feel like this is a good preface. So Skeleton Mage Mastery increase the damage and life of your Skeleton Mages. All right, so the previous amounts are written here and they are crossed out. As you can see, it's 15, 30, 45, 60, etc. This was changed to 20, which is a buff, 40, which is a buff from 30, 60, which is a buff from 45, etc., all the way to a maximum of 200% from a total of 150. So what does this mean exactly? Well, from what it would seem to me, some of these changes are not as transparent as they would seem. Obviously, if you looked at this at the face value, you would say, oh, well, they gave a buff to the skeleton mages. But that would be in direct opposition to what we were told, which is the skeleton mages and skeleton warriors and the golem would be weaker and easier to kill. So my thinking on this is that the base form is going to be weaker, but the buffed form will probably result in around the same tankiness as before, which is more interesting. So basically, they just want you to actually build into the skeletons instead of, not. So they're making them weaker in their base form, but I would assume that with these buffs, they're probably going to be about the same effectiveness as they were before, as long as you are having, all the skeleton mage mastery and the like. Because if they had more HP and it was only 150% boost before, and now they have less HP, but it's a 200% boost, then it's probably going to just be a wash. Which means that a lot of these changes need to be taken with a grain of salt, not just simply like nerf or buff, although I'm going to quantify them as such because it's all very technical and we need to go over this kind of stuff. But they don't have the full details here. Like something that might look like a nerf to me could potentially be a change in a different way than what I think. So as we go over this, just remember that, and we'll talk about it as we go along. So we'll start with the Barbarian. First off, we have Challenging Shout here, and it talks about taunting nearby enemies, and we have a percentage increase here depending on like the skill level, I'm assuming. That's what I'm assuming this is. I'm assuming it's level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, so forth and so on, right? From this, it looks like a slight nerf, so it's going from 45 to 44, which is only a 1% drop. But then it goes to a 2% drop, and then it's a 4% drop, and then so forth and so on. And eventually we get to 76% at the maximum. It doesn't seem like a huge nerf in the amount of reduction, but here it does say that the damage reduction is now only going to last for 6 seconds instead of 8 seconds. So it seems like a small nerf to Challenging Shout. Rallying Cry cooldown is going from, let's see here, movement speed 30%, and resource regeneration is going to be decreased. So it looks like the resource regeneration on Rallying Cry is going down from 50 to 40, 55 to 44, etc. So pretty much a decrease in the resource generation across the board there, which it's not like a huge difference. We're talking about 10%, 11%, and then I think that's 12, so forth and so on. Like it does kind of get a little bit worse as it goes along, but it still goes up to 76% at its maximum versus 95% before. Hammer of the Ancients Fury cost, dealing X amount of damage. It looks like the damage was nerfed a little bit from 5661 to 5055. And then furthermore, like all the way across the board, a small nerf to the total damage. As you can see, maximum is 106.4 before, and it's 95% now. Enhanced Bash, damaging a stunned enemy with Bash grants you 5% base life, was upgraded to 10% base life as Fortify, so it looks like Enhanced Bash has gotten a little bit of a buff there. Double this amount when you use two-handed weapons, so the amount was doubled from 5 to 10, and the doubling effect from the two-handed weapons is going to double that even further from 10 to 20. So it looks like and using Enhanced Bash with a two-handed weapon is going to be pretty sweet because you're going to get 20% base life as Fortify now from that, which is a pretty nice amount of enhancement. Enhanced Whirlwind, gain 1 Fury each time Whirlwind deals direct damage to an enemy. Slashed from 3 with an upgrade to 4 Fury against elite enemies. So we got a nice little buff there as far as the, like, against elite enemies. You get a little bit of extra Fury there per hit. Enhanced Double Swing. If Double Swing stuns damages the knockdown enemy, gain 15 Fury, upgraded to 25. It looks like they gave Double Swing a little bit of a buff. Counter Offensive. While you have Fortify over 50% of your maximum life, you deal increased damage. It looks like that's been nerfed, which would make sense because they've given you like an additional way to build Fortify up here, which is probably going to result in a lot more Fortify in general. So they reduced this but increased this, which is probably going to end up in a wash. It's not really much of a reduction either. We're looking at 1% per level, so 1 and then 2 and then it's 3 and then 4 and so forth and so on until eventually you get to 40%, which is counterpart to 50, so about 10% at its maximum. Enhanced Iron Skin. Iron Skin Berry absorbs 5%, 10% of your more of your maximum life, so a double buff there on Iron Skin. Iron Skin was already good, so Iron Skin's going to be even better. Defensive Stance, increased damage reduction gained while you were fortified by an additional 369 to 246. So that one has been nerfed a little bit, which makes sense because in the patch notes before they were talking about how the base reduction of the Barbarian was going to get reduced a little bit, and then increased a little bit, and then the skills were going to get reduced. So basically the Barbarian got kind of like a flat damage reduction increase, and then his skills got adjusted to make up for that, so that he's tankier to begin with, but you can't really, like, get any low. You're not any lower than you were before using the skills. Whirlwind Old Fury cost per second was 13, 14.3, 15.6. So that's your old damage output. It looks like we've gone up. So Whirlwind is now 17.3 at base versus 13, and 32.9 at maximum versus 24.7. So a little bit of a damage bump there, which is in line with what they said during the patch notes, which was they wanted Whirlwind to be more of a damaging skill and less of a constant use ability, I guess is what they were saying. Furious Whirlwind, while using slashing weapon, Whirlwind also inflicts 20%. It's been changed to 40% of its base damage as bleeding. That's pretty nice for bleed builds. Might make Whirlwind a little bit more tasty for the bleeders. Power Warcry. If at least 6 enemies are nearby when you cast Warcry, your damage bonus is increased by an additional 10%. So they took away the calculation entirely. So it used to be 2 and then a percentage bonus. So that looks like a pretty heavy nerf, especially considering it was 43.5% before at maximum, and now it just seems to be a flat 10%. But what's increasing as you level, or is it 10% per level? That's something we're going to have to take a look at in game. Mighty Warcry. Warcry grants you a 28%, 15% base life as Fortify, so that's a nerf. Furious Upheaval, dealing direct damage to an enemy with a skill that is not Upheaval, causes your next cast of Upheaval to deal 8%, reduced to 3% increased damage, stacking up to 10 times. So that is a pretty hefty nerf, actually. 8% times 10 is obviously 80. 3% times 10 is 30. So you're talking about a pretty hefty nerf to Furious Upheaval. Tactical Rallying Cry. Rallying Cry generates 25, reduced to 20 Fury, and grants an additional 50%, reduced to 20% resource regeneration. So another nerf there. Violent Hammer of Ancients. After overpowering with Hammer of the Ancients, you deal 30% more damage for 2 seconds, increased to 5. So a little bit of a buff there for Violent Hammer of the Ancients. Strategic Iron Skin. Iron Skin also grants 9%, change to 15% base life is fortified, so Iron Skin got another buff. Double this if you cast this while below 50% health, so 15 could be 30, so pretty big buff there to Strategic Iron Skin. Battle Frenzy, while berserking, your other skills gain 5% increased attack speed for each stack of Frenzy you have. Doesn't say there was a previous entry. I don't know what's going on there. That's interesting. There's just no. It's just a change, but no change. Strategic Challenge Shout. While Challenge Shout is active, you gain thorns equal to 50%, reduced to 30% of your maximum life. So it looks like they're messing around with the thorns build. That build was pretty damn powerful, by the way. So that's to be expected. Tough as Nails. Increase your thorns by 20, 40, 60. Again, another nerf here. So 3, 6, 9, 12. So it capped out at 200% before, and now it's capping out at 30%. So you guys who are looking at those Thorns builds is going to see some pretty serious decreases. When enemies hit you, they take an additional 1% increase to 10% of your Thorns as bleeding damage over 5 seconds. So it looks like they increased the bleeding damage from Tough as Nails and decreased the Thorns, which is interesting. Looks like they don't like the Thorns builds, so... Sorry about that, Thorns builds users. Looks like you guys are going to have to figure out whether or not they nerfed you into oblivion or whether they, I don't know, maybe gave you some other way of dishing out damage. Guttural Yell, your shout skills cause enemies to deal 8, 16, 4, 8, so it looks like an overall nerf. Looks like half, so even at max it's 40% now instead of 80. Less damage for 5 seconds. So Guttural Yell is going to give you less of a reduction in damage. Booming Voice, your shout skill effects duration are increased by 10, 20, 30 to 8, 16, 24. Looks like across the board they're kind of reducing the effectiveness of a lot of the shouts. That's very interesting. I mean, this one in particular is only 20%, but still. Martial Vigor, damage reduction against elites is increased 4, 8, 12, 3, 6, 9, so another little bit of a nerf there. Again, though, looking across the board when it comes to this kind of stuff, like it seems to all have to do with damage reduction, fortify, things like that. So if they gave the barbarian a flat increase in his defensiveness, like as a general rule, they would have to reduce a lot of these fortifies and damage reductions and things as a result of giving the barbarian a more tanky, like static ability, which is basically what they did. They increased his tankiness overall. So let's see here. Outburst gained 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. Also gained 20, reduced to 10 thorns, another nerf to thorns. Thorns for each 25, 50 bonus maximum life you have. So that's actually a pretty hefty nerf right there. So they reduced the amount that you gain from 20 to 10, which is a 50% nerf. Then they also increased the threshold from 25 to 50 bonus maximum life you have, which is another 50% nerf. So that is a 75% nerf overall if you're keeping track to the way that Outburst works. So Outburst basically got a 75% nerf there for Thorns. Prime Iron Maelstrom. Iron Maelstrom gains 10% increased critical strike chance and deals 20% increased critical strike damage. No, I don't know what they changed there. Aggressive Resistance, gain 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 3, 6, 9. Looks like a 1% reduction each tier, capping off at a 10% reduction at level 10, which makes sense. Damage reduction while berserking. Iron Maelstrom cooldown, seconds lucky hit chance, activate 3 times to attach chains to each of your weapons and perform an attack. There's some wording changes here. Dealing 60% damage and stunning enemies for 2 seconds. Second, it says next, your two-handed slash weapon swipes. Third, it says finally. I don't know why they changed that. I guess it's just kind of like a wording change. I don't think there's any actual change to the ability. Wrath of the Berserker, cooldown seconds lucky, seconds exploded to rage. Knocking back surrounding enemies and gaining berserking and unstoppable for 10 seconds. It looked like they changed it from a chance to a definite gain. So it's no longer a chance, it's a gain. It's just you just get it. So that's interesting. Warcry cooldown seconds below Mighty Warcry, increasing your damage dealt for 8 seconds, reduced to 6. Nearby allies for 4 seconds, reduced to 3. If I want to like quantify what I think's going on with the Barbarian, first off, we have a lot of changes to his tankiness, all right? But that also is not including what they did to make him tankier as a, like a standard. So, like, it feels like a lot of the tankiness stuff is just simply adjustments for his extra damage reduction that he's getting base. However, there's also a lot of stuff in here nerfing the shouts, which is, I guess they felt like the shouts were too powerful. The whirlwind changes are in here, obviously, which they talked about. But then there's a lot of hefty nerfs to the Thorns builds. Like, a lot of the Thorn skills got some pretty hefty nerfs. Overall, it seems like they really didn't like the Thorns builds. And overall, it looks, to me, as a whole, it looks like a nerf to the Barbarian. Druid, elemental exposure, lucky hit your storm skills deal 20% or up to a 20% chance, which is reduced to 10. So that's a nerf to elemental exposure. Abundance, basic skills generate 10, 20, 30, reduced to 6, 12, 18. More spirit, so a little more reduction of spirit regeneration there from abundance. Fierce Maul increases the range and radius of Maul by 30%, reduced to 25%. Boulder. It looks like Boulder. Unearth a large boulder that repeatedly knocks back enemies. So it was changed from knocks back to repeatedly knocks back. Repeatedly knocks back enemies, dealing blank damage with each hit. But they took away and crushes wording, which I'm not really sure what's going on there. It sounds like it just knocks back more. So that's interesting. Maul generates spirit 11 lucky, 14 lucky hit chance. So that's been upgraded a little bit. Nothing else changed there. So it looks like they upped the lucky hit chance on a bunch of these abilities. Maul got from 11 to 14. Storm got reduced from 15 to 14. Storm Strike. Landslide got spirit cost reductions. Quite a bit, 112.5 to 75, 123.9 to 82.6, and so forth and so on. At max level, it looks like, or that's the damage output, right? No, so the damage output has been decreased on Landslide by quite a bit. That's what I'm looking at here. These patch notes are a little confusing, but if you really look at them, they're not too confusing, because what these represent, as far as I can tell, is just level 1, right? So this is level 1, level 2, level 3, level 4, etc. So this seems to be level 1 now, and that's a pretty stark reduction in damage output on Landslide. Not really sure why they'd nerf Landslide. It didn't really feel that powerful, but it does look like Landslide has seen significant reduction in its damage output, which is kind of sad, because I like that ability. Fierce Earth Spike, Fortify for 2, change to 4% of your base life, so that's a buff. Claw, Generate Spirit 9, change to 10% lucky hit. Earth Spike, Generate Spirit 8% lucky hit, change to 10%, another buff there, so 2 buffs. 1% on Claw, 2% on Earth Spike. Enhanced Maul, changed from Fortify 1% to 2%. And then they took away the 6% of your base life. I'm trying to figure out what the hell's going on there. It says then fortify for 1, which was changed to 2. So then fortify for 2%. And then it says 6. Well, it's a point there. Okay, I think I see it. So 1.6. So it was changed from 1.6 to 2. So we got a 0.4% increase there on Enhanced Maul. Shred was changed from 2% to 1% of your maximum life. Enemy is struck. So that's a little bit of a decrease in the effectiveness of Shred. 50% decrease, actually. Enhanced Pulverize was changed from 10 per seconds to 12. That guaranteed overpower was actually pretty powerful, so I can understand the nerf there. So they gave us an extra 2 seconds to wait until we get our next guaranteed overpower. Enhanced Cyclone Armor. Enemies are slowed by 70% for 1 second, changed to 2. So 1.5 changed to 2. So a 0.5 increase in the slow there, which could be helpful for some builds. Enhanced Ravens, 5% increased critical chance against enemies for 6 seconds after they are hit by ravens. Against enemies hit by ravens. It looks like a wording change. I'm not really sure if that actually changed anything for the ravens. The ravens are pretty powerful, by the way. You should test them out. Enhanced Trample. Trample deals 30%, changed to 150% damage bonus. This bonus reduced by 15%, changed to 50 for each enemy hit after the first. That's a pretty big nerf, but an increase at the same time. So Trample got a huge increase in its damage from 30 to 150. But then each subsequent hit was reduced instead of by 15% to 50. So after 3 hits, it does no damage, which is the same as it was before at 15%. So 15%, 15%, and then the third hit would do no damage. At this one, it's 50%, 50%, and then the 50%, and then the fourth hit does no damage. So they've allowed it to hit an extra target, and it does more damage base, but loses more damage every single hit. So enhanced trample is interesting. Wild impulses looks like a reduction of about 2% per level. Yeah, 5 to 3, 10 to 6, etc., all the way from 50 to 30. But it costs more. So this is something that makes your core skills cost more, but deal more damage. So they reduced the spirit cost by 2% per level, but decreased the increased damage by 5% per level. So we went from 10% to 5 on the first level, 20 to 10. So they made it less effective overall, but it seems like they compensated by reducing the amount of increased spirit cost. I can't really say whether this is a nerf or a buff. Increased spirit cost to too much of a degree could just equal some skill that's you can't actually use it. Maybe the increased spirit cost was just too much and things weren't working out quite the way they planned, so they reduced the spirit cost and then decreased the increased damage to compensate. But that does seem like a nerf to wild impulses. Innate debilitating roar. Debilitating roar also slows enemies by 40%, increased to 65% for its duration, so that's nice. Nice little buff to the slow there. Raging pulverize. Enemies overpowered by pulverize are stunned for 2 seconds, which was changed from when they are overpowered with pulverize. I think that's just a wording change. Wild Maul. Maul has a 10% chance, changed to 20% chance to knock down enemies. That's kind of nice. So a 50% buff there in the knockdown chance. Debilitating Roar changed from 50% chance, or no, damage dealt by 50%. It's a reduction in damage. So Debilitating Roar got a buff from 50% to 70, which is reducing the nearby enemy's damage for 4 seconds. So was that 50, 60, 70? So 20% buff on Debilitating Roar. Lightning Storm got a damage change. It looks like a overall buff from 25 to 32 for base and 47.5 to 60.8 for its maximum. So Lightning Storm could be hitting a little bit harder now. There's also an interesting wording change here. So it says damage per strike increase the number of strikes the longer it is channeled up to a maximum of 5. But this one says the number of strikes is increased the longer the storm is channeled up to a maximum of 5 at once. I'm not really sure if that wording change is important, but the addition of at once makes me think that maybe you could hit multiple targets at once. Like all at the same time, maybe, instead of them all happening. I don't know. I'll have to take a look at that. But it definitely does look like a buff to Lightning Storm in general. Call of the Wild, your companion skills deal, and no change there. I think that's just a wording change. Charged Atmosphere, every 18-15 seconds. Lightning Bolt wording, that's another wording change. Provocation, when you remain in werebear form for at least 25, increased to 30. Your next skill will overpower. What's the negative numbers? It looks like a decrease in the amount of time you have to stay in werebear form. But then it goes into the negative numbers, and I have no clue what that even means. Um, you just basically get free overpowers no matter what. I mean, what would be the point of going past 0 if you just get a free overpower while you're in? I don't know. But it definitely does seem like a. Trying to see here. It looks like a nerf to the duration. So you have to wait 5 seconds longer for your overpower, um, on every single tier. But you can still hit 0, and you can even go into the negatives. You can't get to -20 anymore, whatever the hell that means. But I mean, it seems like overall, if you build into this skill, you'll still be able to reach the same 0 seconds that you could before. It's just going to take you 1 extra point. So level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you have to get to level 7 to hit the 0 this time instead of level 6. Heightened senses upon shapeshifting into a werewolf. The werebear gains damage reduction. Doesn't look like any change there. Perfect Storm. Storm skills that you cast grant 1 spirit instead of 2 and deal 20%. Change to 15% increased damage when dealing. So they reduce the amount of damage and they reduce the generation of Perfect Storm, which is interesting. Kind of an overall nerf there, both in the damage and the amount of spirit that it generates. Electric Shock was changed to up to a blank percent chance. I'm not really sure why they would change the wording like that. Doesn't seem to be any other change there for that, though. We also have Predatory Instinct. Critical strike chance against close enemies is increased. 3, 6, 2, 4. So it looks like a 1% nerf across the board to critical strike chance on close enemies. This is actually a pretty good one, and I was using that on one of my builds, so that's a pretty hefty nerf there, especially at cap, which reduces your crit chance by 10% over the 30. So definitely kind of a sad thing there to see that one go down, because the crit builds were actually really fun. It's not like a huge, ridiculous nerf in the beginning, so if you're only putting a couple points into it, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But as you level it up higher and higher, the nerf becomes more and more apparent, because it's 1% per level up to 10%, which basically means you're going to lose 10% crit at max if you're building that. Another wording change from strike to bolt. Nothing special there. Cataclysm, tornadoes changed to twisters, but no actual change to the ability. Trample was changed. Looks like mainly damage output change. Am I looking at this correctly? Dealing blank damage, 25 changed to 75, 27.5 changed to 82. Looks like a pretty big damage bump on the initial hit. So a pretty huge increase. We're looking at 47.5 on our maximum before to 142.5. So it looks like Trample has been buffed considerably. However, the enemies who are knocked back into a terrain has not been changed at all. So that damage is still the same. Wolves, looks like they got a damage buff. A pretty considerable damage buff from what I see. Direct your wolves to attack, leaping them to strike a target for 35, 38, changed to 110, 121. 42, 45. Maximum is 66.5. Maximum is now 209. Seems like a pretty huge damage buff for the wolves. Not their passive damage, it looks like, but their directed damage was increased. So their passive damage remained the same, but their direct damage has been increased considerably. Cyclone armor, granting you resistances to non-physical damage. Looks like the resistance to non-physical damage has been decreased from 20 to 10. So across the board, it looks like a 10% decrease. At level 10, it's 34.6, and now it's level 10. It's 18.1, so a pretty hefty decrease on Cyclone Armor. I kind of saw that coming because Cyclone Armor was really powerful before. It's kind of like a no-brainer, like a 1-point wonder that you would definitely want to have on like every freaking druid, and I guess it makes sense for them to nerf it a little bit. It says knocking back enemies and dealing damage. It looks like the damage was increased on the knockback pretty considerably. It looks like about a 15% increase, which is double damage from what it was before. So 15 to 30, 16.5 to 33, to a cap of 28.5 to 57. So a pretty hefty increase in the amount of damage that Cyclone Armor does when it's activated, but a reduction in the amount of resistances that it gives you passively, which was to be expected. Ravens, let's see here. Ravens have been increased in damage by quite a bit. That's actually pretty massive. So at maximum, they're 304 from 165.5, 161.5. I'm going to be honest, it's not really something that they should have done. Ravens were already pretty powerful. If you played around with the Ravens in the beta, you would know that they were actually pretty damn good. And this is a hefty buff to them, so they're going to be even better. So now you definitely want to check out the Ravens because they're probably going to be ridiculous. Shred, first attack, dash toward the target and deal. So the first attack is going to dash. I mean, I thought the first attack already dashed, didn't it? I don't think that's much of a change. Enhanced Poison Creeper, doesn't seem to be a change there. Brutal Poison Creeper doesn't seem to be a change. I'm not really sure why those are included unless there's like wording changes on them. Poison Creeper has been changed though. Every 7 seconds. Actually, no, I don't see any changes here either. No crossouts. There's like 3 Poison Creeper entries, so I guess we'll have to test that out and see what's going on with the Poison Creeper. Poison Creeper seemed pretty cool already. I wish I had the points to invest in them, but it's really hard to do the Companion Druid because you just need a lot of points to actually invest in that particular build. But that pretty much sums it up for the Druid. A lot of these look like buffs. Some of these are nerfs. Overall, it seems like they're trying to increase the damage of certain skills and decrease the spirit regeneration, make more reason to use the companions, so forth and so on. It's interesting. The nerf to Cyclone Armor is I'm gonna say I was actually thinking that that was probably going to happen because it was pretty darn strong as it was before. It basically gave you like a huge amount of passive resistances for very minimal investment, and it was really darn good. And it just, you didn't even have to use it. Like you just put it on your bar and that was it, and you got a huge bump in your defensiveness. Next is a Necromancer, so let's take a look at him. We got Bone Splinters has been changed. Dealing damage looks like a really heavy decrease in Bone Splinters. So Bone Splinters went from 22.5 to 8 and 42.8 to 15.2. So pretty big decrease in Bone Splinters damage. Enhanced Bone Splinters had a 30% chance, which has now been reduced to 25%. So a reduction there as well. Enhanced Bone Spear was increased. 3 shards when it's destroyed, dealing 10, 11, increased to 25, 27.5. Maximum was 19 before. It is now increased to 47.5. So Bone Splinters nerfed, Enhanced Bone Splinters nerfed. Enhanced Bone Spear increased. Enhanced Decrepify, 10% chance to stun them, to be stunned. Looks like a wording change, nothing to enhance special there. Corpse Explosion, 75, 82, 50, 55. Looks like an overall decrease in the damage output that Corpse Explosion does. Pretty massive. We're going from a 25% decrease on the damage output for level 1. Level 10 is 142.5 down to 95%. So Corpse Explosion definitely took a hit in its damage output. I'll take a look at that. Paranormal Bloodlance was increased. Bloodlance essence cost is reduced by 2/3, so a little bit of a buff there for Paranormal Bloodlance. Plagued Corpse Explosion reduced from 10% damage to 8% damage against enemies that are slowed. So again, another nerf to Corpse Explosion. I don't see any actual change to Terror. Not sure what they did there. And I don't see any actual change to Gloom. Not sure what they did there. Imperfectly imbalanced, your core skills are 5, 10, 15, reduced to 3, 6, 9. So about a 2% decrease there across the board, all the way up to 30%, which equals out to a 20% decrease at level 10. So it's 2% per level. So it starts out at 2, then 4, then 6, so forth and so on until it reaches 20% at its maximum, which is a buff from what I can tell. So your core skills cost 5% more, but this is 3% more. So they reduce the overall essence cost increase of imperfectly balanced. However, they also decreased the increased damage of the skill as well, similarly to what they did to the druid on one of his skills. So decreasing the essence cost, but also decreasing the damage at the same time. Shadow Blight doesn't seem to have a change listed there. They got a wording change. Take an additional 20%. I think that's just a wording change. Bonded in essence, every 5 seconds, skeletal priest will heal your skeletons for an additional 20%. That's just another wording change. Blood Mist got a change. Or is that just wording? 1.7 damage to enemies and healing. And crossed out, change to heal, but no actual change to the ability. Bloodlance got a change. Looks like a damage buff, going from 45 to 67. So Bloodlance definitely got a change there. At maximum, it's 85.5, changed to 128.2, so a pretty big buff there for Bloodlance. Decrepify got its essence cost. Slow stayed the same. Damage output. It looks like the damage output stayed the same, but there's more breakpoints. So, like, I'm looking at this, and it seems like we have, what, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. Yeah, so this is 10. This is your standard 10 that we normally see. And the maximum is still 31.1, so no change, right? But now instead of there being 10 points, 10 different levels, there's 20 different levels. And in between those original, spots, there's additional spots that are more breakpoints, I guess. So like 30.2 doesn't exist on the list before. As you can see, there's no 30.2. So we've got a bunch of extras. Like here's 29.4, which is the 9th level, right? But then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in between the 9th level and the 10th level inserted. And then similarly with the 28, which is right here, we've got 2 inserted in between that. So they basically kind of spread it out like mayonnaise over bread. It still has the same breakpoints, but there's more breakpoints. Not really sure how that's going to affect the skill overall. Initiates Reap. Reap instantly kills enemies below 5% health. That's a wording change. Blighted Corpse Tendrils has a 20% increase to 30% chance to drop a blood orb when damaging enemies, so a 10% increase there. Decomposed generates more essence now from 6 to 7. I did like using Decompose for generating essence, so that's pretty nice. Blighted Corpse Explosion, no change. Skeletal Mage Mastery, we talked about this at the beginning of the video. They increase the overall life of the skeleton masteries with the skill. So the skill will give you more life per level. Same thing with the Golem Mastery, also an increase in life, as you can tell. So we went from 150 on the Golem Mastery to 250. We went from 150 on the Skeleton Mage Mastery to 200. So pretty big buff there in the HP. Obviously, though, there might be a decrease to their base HP, which is what we're suspecting. Death's Defense. Your minions cannot lose more than 75. Looks like this... No, they definitely changed it, of their maximum life from a single damage instance. So it went from 75 to 75, which is no change, but 50 to 60, which is a buff. 25 to 45, which is a buff. I'm not really quite sure how this is working, to be honest. I would assume that cannot lose more than 75% of their life, of their maximum life from a single damage instance. I'm a little bit confused because it goes into the negative numbers, and I'm not really sure what the hell it means when it goes into the negative numbers. Like, what the hell would negative 60% of their life be? I mean, my original assumption on this was that it makes your minions more tanky, because like if a monster comes in and hits them for 75% of their life, or 76% of their life, or 100% of their life, they can't die. Like they just simply take 75% instead. So I would assume that 60% would mean that they can only take 60% of their life in a single instance, all the way down to 15% of their life in a single instance. So even if a monster hit them for 100% of their life, they would only take 15% of that as damage, right? But when it goes into the negative numbers, I have no clue what the hell that means, because I would assume that that is like completely making them invulnerable, and I have absolutely no clue. But one thing I am noticing here is that before we were going up into the negative 150, whereas now we're only going to negative 60. So it definitely seems like something's going on with like the beginning, they're giving you more, like easier, but then at the end you're getting less, which seems like a slight buff to the general tankiness of the minions in the beginning, but a nerf to their tankiness fully built. At least if I'm reading it correctly. Fueled by Death, 369 changed from 4812, so a nerf there, 10% nerf at maximum. Also, the increased damage for 4 seconds was changed to 6, so an increase in the duration, but a decrease in the damage output. Overall, interesting. It looks like a nerf to bone skills, but a little bit of a buff to bone spear. It looks like overall a nerf to corpse explosion, and in general a buff to some of the blood skills. And then we also have the very interesting skeleton, or the minion changes, which I'm not really sure what the hell's going on there. Rogue Sorcerer. So we're almost done. I know this has been a really long video, but these are really in-depth patch notes, so do forgive me. So Rogue Subverting Stealth, breaks concealment, always makes enemies vulnerable for 3, has been changed to 6 seconds, so a buff there for Subverting Stealth. Enhanced Penetrating Shot deals 20%, changed to 10 increased damage per enemy it pierces, so that's a nerf to Enhanced Penetrating Shot. Enhanced Rapid Fire, each subsequent arrow from Rapid Fire increased. Doesn't look like any change there. Shadow Imbuement, 25% increased critical strike chance, changed to 15% against injured enemies, so a nerf to Enhanced Shadow Imbuement. Shadow Imbuement was pretty powerful, so I'd probably warrant it. They changed a contraction to a non-contraction there. That doesn't, no actual change. Poison Imbuement cooldown. Your next 2 imbuable skills deal poison damage and apply 70, changed to 100. 133 changed to 190 of their base damage, so a buff to poison imbuement. Countering Dark Shadow, while you have at least 2 active, changed to 4 active shadows from Dark Shadow, you gain a 10% decreased to 8% critical strike chance. So a little bit of a nerf there to Countering Dark Shadow. Subverting Dark Shadow, each active shadow from Dark Shadow grants 3% to increased to 4% increased movement speed. Mixed Shadow Imbuement, enemies infected by Shadow Imbuement skills, looks like a wording change. Shadow Clone, again, looks like a wording change. Agile, using cooldown, increases your dodge chance by, looks like an overall increase in the dodge chance from 1% per level, looks like, all the way up to 10% for level 10. And they also increased the duration from 2 to 3%. Sorry, 2 seconds to 3 seconds. Mending Obscurity, while stealth, you heal for 1%, changed to 3. Looks like a pretty big buff to the Mending Obscurity skill. It's literally a 2% buff per level, up to a total of 20% at maximum. So you get a pretty nice heal at maximum, a 30% maximum life per second when using Mending Obscurity. Reactive Defense, that's going to be a pretty crazy PvP one. Because if you can stealth away and you can heal like maximum life per second, I mean, 30% maximum life per second could potentially make you invulnerable as long as you build into stealth and as long as they don't break you out of stealth. Reactive defense gained 4, changed to 6, so a 2% increase there. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Yeah, it looks like a 15%. Yeah, it's a 2% increase per level of damage reduction from reactive defense. So a little bit of a buff there. Countering poison trap decreased or increased from 20% to 30% chance to reset your skills. Advanced twisting blades. When twisting blades return, your active cooldowns are reduced by 1 second, decreased to 0.25 per second per enemy. Twisting blades was the focus of a lot of scrutiny among players, saying that it was pretty overpowered. Everybody was making jokes and memes about Twisting Blades being overpowered. And this looks like a very strong 75% debuff to Twisting Blades. So Twisting Blades has been nerfed pretty heavily. Basically, it's no longer going to reduce those cooldowns by a full second per enemy. Instead, it's only going to reduce it by 0.25, which, like I said, 75% reduction in its effectiveness. Countering smoke grenade has a chance to reduce its cooldown by 1 second or by 2 or 3 seconds. So a little bit of a buff there if you hit a vulnerable enemy for countering smoke grenade. Blended and poison imbuement got a pretty heavy increase from 30 to 75% damage. Looks like they buffed up poison imbuement by quite a bit. Consuming shadows, no change there. Precision imbuement, imbued skills gain increased critical strike chance. Looks like that's been nerfed by about 2% per level, up to 20% for the maximum level. So the critical strike chance has gone down for that. Concealment, the movement speed has been increased from 25% to 30. Overall, looks like the rogue has seen a lot of nerfs, although some buffs as well. Specifically, looks like they focused on buffing poison imbuement and nerfing shadow imbuement, which seems pretty on par for what I experienced with the class. Not really sure the penetrating shot nerf was warranted, but a lot of increases to movement speed as well, though, overall. So it looks like they made her faster, gave her more buffs to her movement speeds, and a pretty strong nerf to advanced twisting blades, which is probably going to have a pretty strong impact on that. And then finally we come to the sorcerer, which has a lot of changes, so we're going to go over this. I do apologize for the length of this, but these patch notes are extensive, and the changes are pretty ridiculous. Sorcerer, Flame Shield. Looks like we have no change to the... Oh, no, we do have a little bit of a change to the duration. That's really quite strange. It changes by like 0.1 second per level. So 2.1, 2.2 to 2.1 to 2.4 to 2.2. So it's 0.1, 0.2, 0.3, 0.4, 0.5, 0.6, all the way up to a nerf of 3.8 to 2.9 seconds, which doesn't really seem like a huge difference, but I do remember a lot of people telling me that that ability was pretty sick. Looks like they increased the damage, though, of the ability, so it's now from 23.4 at base to 40, and at maximum it goes to 44.5, from 44.5 to 76%, so pretty big increase in its damage per second, but a small decrease in its duration. Frost Nova got an increase in the amount of time it freezes enemies from 2 to 3 seconds. Frost skills have up to a... looks like a wording change. Align the elements. Damage reduction. Pretty heavy reduction in the damage reduction on Align the Elements. It was 5, 10, 15. Now it's 1, 2, 3. So... a hefty reduction. At maximum, it was doing 50% reduction, and now it's 10% reduction against elites for each second you haven't taken damage, up to 50%, and they reduced the cap to 40%. So, wow, okay. So not only did they reduce the overall cap for the skill by 10%, but they also reduced the amount of damage reduction that you would gain for each second, which means that like even if you had it maxed out at level 10, it would take you 4 full seconds to hit the 40% cap. Whereas at level 1, it's going to take you 40 seconds. At level 2, it's going to take you 20 seconds, and so forth and so on. Whereas before, it was going a hell of a lot quicker. And at level 10, it would take you a whole 1 second. So pretty big nerf to align the elements there for the sorceress. It looks like her tankiness has gone down by quite a bit with that ability. Enhanced Spark. Each time a spark hits its primary target, it has a 20% chance. It changed to 40% chance. So a 100% buff in the percent chance to hit up to 3 additional enemies. So that's a pretty big buff for Enhanced Spark. Enhanced Ice Shards. Ice Shards have a 15% chance, changed to 40% chance to ricochet to another enemy. Another pretty big buff to Ice Shards. Enhanced Charged Bolts. Dealing 15%, changed to 24%. So that's another buff to Charged Bolts. Looks like they want people to use Charged Bolts. Enhanced Frost Nova reduces its cooldown by 2 seconds instead of 1. So 1 second now instead of 2. Up to 6 seconds, changed to 4 seconds per cast. So a nerf to Frost Nova. Wasn't there another nerf to Frost Nova? Oh no, that's a buff to Frost Nova. So they increased the freezing on Frost Nova, and they decreased the cooldown reduction per cast. So it looks like they're kind of balancing it, not really so much nerfing it, or like, you know what I mean. Let's see here. Enhanced Ice Blades. Ice Blades cooldown is reduced by 1 to 0.5 seconds. So Ice Blades got a buff when it hits the enemies. Deep Freeze 12 to change to 25%. So a little bit of a buff there in damage output for Deep Freeze. Chilling enemies for 20 changed down to 14%. So the chill effect was reduced, but the damage output was increased. Ice Armor, 10% of your damage changed to 5% of your damage. Add to its barrier. A little bit of a nerf for Ice Armor. Icy Touch doesn't seem to have a change. Elemental Dominance, your core skills, 4, 8, 12, 3, 6, 9. So a little bit of a nerf there to Elemental Dominance. But 10% overall at level 10. So basically 1% per level. Not a huge change there, but a lot once you get it maxed out. Another wording change. Charged Bolts damage increase. So yeah, that is in line with what we're looking at. So Charged Bolts definitely seeing quite a big of a damage increase. 17.5 before, 28% now at level 1. At maximum, 33.2 to 53.2. So pretty big buff in damage there. Hydras. Hydras have had their duration decreased from 12 to 10 seconds. That's a pretty big nerf. So they're going to last for 2 seconds less. And it looks like their damage output has been decreased significantly from 30 to 12 at their base and 57 to 22.8 at their maximum. Maximum 1 active Hydras at a time. So it looks like quite a hefty nerf to Hydras, which is pretty much what I was expecting. Hydras seemed pretty damn overpowered in the patch, so I don't know what anybody else was expecting. Incinerate, looks like Incinerate got a damage buff. From what I'm looking at here, we've got 9.1 to 12.25, and at maximum it's 23.275 at 17.3. So a little bit of a buff for Incinerate. Damage per second was increased too, from 49.1 to 66.2. And 93.4 to 125.7. So a pretty big buff overall to Incinerate. That might be worth taking a look at. Frigid Breeze, cold damage against vulnerable enemies has take up to, that's a wording change. Ice Blades got a damage decrease, 30.7% damage to 23%. So it looks like Ice Blades actually went down in damage by quite a bit. At maximum, they were at 58.3% before, and now they're 43.7%. Chain Lightning got a decrease in damage as well. 42% at minimum, 36% now. At maximum, they're 79.8% down to 68.4%. Interesting change there. So Chain Lightning was pretty powerful. Protection, using cooldown grants you a maximum life barrier for 5 seconds, reduced to 2. Pretty big reduction there for protection. Wording change on Crippling Flames. Meteor got a pretty hefty increase in damage from 50 to 80, and at maximum 95 to 152%. So Meteor might be worth taking a look at now. Pretty big damage buff there for Meteor. But that seems to be just the lucky hit. Not really sure, but definitely a buff to Meteor. Mystical Frost Nova. Frost Nova makes enemies vulnerable for 4 seconds, has been increased to 6. Looks like they're nerfing the Frost Nova damage, but they're making Frost Nova more of a utilitarian skill, offering freezes and vulnerabilities and things like that, which seems to be an interesting way to go for that skill. Mystical Ice Armor, damage against vulnerable enemies, it contributes 100% or 50% more to the Ice Armor's barrier. I'm noticing a trend here. It seems like they are, number one, nerfing Chain Lightning, nerfing the ice swords. They seem to be reducing the overall tankiness of the sorceress, which means that what we might be looking at is a sorceress that's a lot weaker, a lot more of a glass cannon than she was before. A lot of people noted this during the beta, that the sorceress just felt really tanky. She was more tanky than the barbarian, and I think that might have hurt their feelings, because we have a situation now where it seems like the sorceress is going to be a lot less tanky. Summoned Ice Blades, 50% reduced to 20% of enhanced Ice Blades cooldown reduction is applied to your other skills. So Ice Blades, another nerf there for Ice Blades. Glinting Spark. Spark grants 2% increased critical strike chance for 3 seconds, increased to 5, up to a 10%, decreased to 8. So they increased the duration of it, but decreased the overall effectiveness of it by 2%. So not really so much of a nerf or a buff, really just a balancing of the way the ability works. Greater Chain Lightning. If Chain Lightning bounces off you, its next hit deals 25% and decreased to 10% damage. So very interesting patch notes. I mean, if I had to quantify everything, I would say the Barbarian has gotten a lot of buffs, but there are some changes in here which are generally trying to make things a little bit harder to build Fury. The Druid has gotten a lot of buffs as well, but some key skills were definitely nerfed. The Necromancer has gotten a lot of nerfs to things like the Bone skills and Corpse Explosion, but also some pretty interesting buffs to the Blood skills, and some interesting things to the minions that we need to take a look at. The Rogue got quite a few nerfs to the Shadow Imbuement skill and quite a few buffs to the Poison Imbuement skill, a pretty hefty nerf to Advanced Twisting Blades. Movement in general seemed to be increased for the Rogue, so that she has more of an ability to get around the battlefield. Movement speed increases across the board. The Sorceress seems to have gotten quite a bit of tankiness reduction. She's going to be a lot easier to kill, it seems like now. Hydra's got nerfed. Charged Bolts got buffed. Chain Lightning got nerfed. Incinerate got buffed. In general, it looks like they heavily nerfed Ice Blades across the board. Everything that I could see about Ice Blades was a freaking nerf. Frost Nova got kind of a utility change, and Hydra got nerfed as well, pretty heavily. Damage output and duration both nerfed. So interesting. I think Hydras were a little bit overpowered. And Chain Lightning, I don't even know if Chain Lightning was overpowered, but it was definitely fun to use. But they definitely nerfed the crap out of that too. Overall, those are the changes. As always, I do appreciate you guys and gals watching my videos, even when it's literally an hour-long video on the patch note changes. And it looks like in the future, this is probably going to be pretty par for the course as far as changes go. I'll try and chapter this out so that you guys can, pull up just your particular class. But let me end this before it gets any longer. As always, thanks for watching, and keep watching.